Hello friends, my name is AJ and welcome to the 8th video of the Carolina Analytics and Data Sciences Introduction to Python for Data Science series. In this video, I'm going to be talking about functions, what they are, how to create them, and how to run them. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright everyone, so again you can see here that I'm in a blank Jupyter notebook. The first thing we're going to be talking about is essentially what is a function. And a function essentially allows us to run a procedure or run a predefined procedure in our code. All right. Now, functions may have essentially three main components to them. You have the inputs of a function. So you have inputs which are also known as arguments. Basically, think of it as what you supply into the function. Then you have the procedure, or what is actually being done by the function. So what is being done? What is being done? And then here you have the output. And this is what is being returned by the function. And this is optional. Some functions do not have an output. All right. And now you might be trying to wonder, okay, well, you have inputs, you have a procedure, you might have an output. But I think the best way to think about this is going to be almost like an assembly line. Think about how you have usually some raw materials that you are feeding into the assembly line. That's similar to the input. Then you're doing something with those raw materials, or you're creating something, and that would be the procedure. And then the output is the final result, what is actually being, or what is being done, what is completed. That is what is going to be, outputted from the assembly line. That is the output of a function. All right. So now, how do we actually, use a function? Well, we've actually used a few functions already in the past, and I may have referred to them as functions. However, we can actually, go in depth now and talk about how we run and how we get our function. Well, the function, first we use the name of the function, and then we have parentheses directly after the name. When you have parentheses directly after a name like this, Python knows that you're talking about a function. All right? And then inside of your parentheses, this is where your inputs go, or your arguments. Okay, and arguments, there can be many of them. For example, you can have argument 1, argument 2, etc. Okay, etc. You can have many different arguments or many different inputs that are being inputted inside of the function, and you put these in the parentheses on the right side of the name of the function, right? And then what you're outputting, well, if you output anything, then you can save that value. This entire thing here represents the output, right? And you could save this now to a value. So I can say, for example, value or output is equal to this function over here. And when you put a function and you put the arguments, this, just like how when you were to have a variable that stores a value, this essentially represents whatever output is being computed by this function. And it's going to now store it as a variable known as output. So this is the basic, the basic components, if you will, of a function. And we've actually used many functions before. For example, we have used the print function, or the print statement, where you have print, which is the name of our function. Then in parentheses, we put our argument, which is what we want to print. So for example, a string that says hello world, that can be put in as our argument. And then what's going to happen here is it's going to return, actually it's not going to return, it's going to display whatever is put inside of its argument. It's going to display the value of it. All right. And so I'm being careful not to say that it's outputting something, because this is actually an example of one function that does not have an output. For example, if I say, if I say output is equal to print, right? And I were to then print out what output is. I know it's kind of weird using, using print on this print over here. You can see that it literally prints out none. There's no output here because this particular function does not provide an output. Now, an example of a function that actually returns something, so I'm going to go back to print, right? Where we actually have an output is going to be with the length. So let's say I have another shopping list, so length, and I create a shopping list of, I'll just say test, test2, test3, okay? I guess really not that much of a shopping list. We'll just say that this is a normal list or something. And if I print out the length, well, the length here is the name of our function. Our argument is our list, and our output is actually going to be how many values are inside of my list. And it's now going to save this as my output variable. All right, if I were to print out output, you will see that it actually prints out 3 right here. It prints out the value. This is an example of a function that actually has an output or returns something, and that's going to be the number of elements inside of a collection. And as you can see here, it's saving that as this variable, and it's saving it as output. So that is the main difference. You can see here how print hello world does not have any output. However, here for this length function, it does have an output. Now with print and length, these are actually functions that are built inside of Python automatically. They are native to Python. However, we can create our own functions. So how do we do that? Well, we can use this basic, framework to do so. The first thing we need the def keyword, def, which is short for actually define. So we want to define a function, and now we put the name of the function right over here that we want, and then we have parentheses. And now in parentheses, we actually put in the arguments that we want to take in. So for example, I'll just call this arg1, right? And if it takes in a second argument, maybe arg2, you separate them using commas. And then here you have a colon. And then here, just like with the if, the while, and the if statement, the while and for loops, you have an indent. So all of the code now that's in here is going to be part of the function. Every time I run this function, all the code inside of here is going to be complete. All right. So let's say I want to do something. Let's say I want my new value to be equal to arg1. So arg1 plus arg2. And then let's say I want my output to be new val divided by 2. Well, how do I actually, how do I actually output my value? Well, to do that, you need to use the keyword return. And return is a keyword used before whatever you're outputting. To the right of the return keyword will be the output of your function. Now, once you use return, none of the code afterward is going to even run as part of the function, meaning that return should always be the last line. You can only return one output for a function. Okay. Now, that output could be a list. It could contain multiple things, but it needs to be one single value. I cannot say return this and return, for example, new val divided by 3. It's not going to let you do that. It's only going to return the first thing. It's not going to return the second thing. So the first return statement, it means the function is done running. It stops running. Anything after return is not run, and the output is given. So let's say I want to actually create a function. So I'm going to say, for example, def, I can literally call concat, and let's say I just want to take my first argument and add it to the second argument. So I just return arg1 plus arg2. All it does, it takes the first value, second value, and add them together. All right, and let's say that these are strings. We want these to be strings. Now all I have to do, run my cell, and now my function is created. We have a new function with the name of concat that takes in these two arguments and that now returns the value of these two added together. So for example, I can print out concat, all right? And of course here, I will have inside of my parentheses, and I guess I'll just remove the print statement for now so it's a little bit easier. So we have concat, right? And we take two arguments. So for example, I can say hello as my first argument, and then I can have world as my second argument, and these are two strings. And now when I run this, you can see that it takes the first item, the first argument, and well here, and the second argument, and it adds them together and outputs this value. All right, and that essentially is how to create and run functions. Now you could do many things. So for example, in the last video when I talked about arrays, you notice how I went through, lists, and how I went through that list and I made all the values capitalized. Well, I can make a function to do that. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to say def capitalize list. All right. I'm going to now take in a list, and I can literally put that exact same for loop inside of my function. I can say for item in list, and then item.upper, just like that. Now I want to print out the uppercase version of my item. All right, and now if I were to run capitalize list on a list, so let's say that I run it on my test 2 and test 3, I can put it inside as my argument, and you can see now it's going to print out my values in all caps, test 1, test 2, and test 3. And you can see because I used print here, right, I do not need a return statement because I'm not saving this value for anything, I'm only displaying it. Now let's say I wanted to create a new list where all of its items are uppercased. Well, I can do so by using some of the things we learned in the last video. I can create an empty list, or just like that. And then for every item in the original list, I now want to make it capital and then add it to my new empty list. Okay, so what I can do is I can say empty list dot append. Remember, append adds a value to a list, and I can just add item.upper. Now if I run this and then run this, you'll see that there is no output, and that's because I forgot the return statement. So I need to go back to my function, make sure that I'm in the right indent, because now I have a for loop inside of a function. So I need to make sure that I'm outside of the for loop but inside of the function, and now I can put in here return empty list, and you can see now that it creates a list where all of the values here are capitalized. All right, everyone, that is it for this video. Now, again, we're going to be using functions a lot more in the future, and one of the main things that we're going to be using functions for are creating formulas or creating our own processes with our data science problems, and we'll be doing that in a lot of future projects as well as future videos. Now, if you liked the video, feel free to like and subscribe for more content. Make sure to follow CADS on social media, as well as join our Listerv for the most up-to-date information on the organization. And see you all in the next one.